Want to open an arcade bar? My name is Alan Riley. I'm a member of the indie arcade collective Death by Audio Arcade. We're at the indie arcade at MAGFest, so you can see a bunch of games that you can also play at Wonderville, one of the venues that we're going to be talking about tonight. And I'm so happy to be talking with the owners of Wonderville, Steph Gross and Mark Klebe, and the manager of Wondercade, another arcade bar. Wonderville is an indie arcade focused bar that's in Brooklyn, and Wondercade is an arcade bar that's in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so would you like to just introduce yourselves a little bit to
do like a quick mic check. Real quick, thank you all so much for coming. This is great. So again, my name is Stephanie Gross. I do the administrative end of operations at Wonderville.
Hi, I'm Mark Klebe. I am mostly the janitor at Wonderville. I fix all the broken stuff.
Hey there, I'm JC. I am the manager at Wondercade and head of their esports.
All right. So we're going to spend some time learning about the background and kind of operational practices of both of these venues. And we'll start with Wonderville, and Stephanie and Mark are going to show us some of the background and context that they're working in.
All right. Well, I can't say it probably too many times. Thank you so much for coming to hear us, and of course at the end if you have questions. But Wonderville, our website, our address. So when you're coming to visit Brooklyn, we're off the J train, the Kosciuszko stop, and that's our social media. And I have stickers for before you go with our social media. So that's Twitch, Twitter,
YouTube, Instagram,
you name it.
Every single thing.
Everything.
So before we talk about Wonderville, we have to talk about this other space called Death by Audio, where Steph and I met back in 2010. Death by Audio was a warehouse on the Williamsburg waterfront in Brooklyn. There were 13 bedrooms, and a bunch of people lived there, not quite legally, but there was a music venue and there was a workshop. And sometime when we first met, I had this harebrained idea that I was going to build an arcade cabinet.
And so I actually took these photos of Mark building this first MAME cabinet. It had a lot of games on it, so like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and The Simpsons. And so when we put it in the music venue, we were lucky enough to be making like $50 to $60 in quarters a month. And that money went back into Mark building the next cabinet.
Yeah, so once I put this in the music venue, I started meeting other people in New York who were building indie games, and it sort of spurned this collective called Death by Audio Arcade, where you can play a lot of their games down in the indie arcade. And this is a photo of us building Crystal Brawl. One of the developers, Chris Hernandez, is here. This was the first maybe indie arcade at MAGFest in 2013. And we kind of snowballed into building more and more cabinets. And Death by Audio Arcade has built, 20 to 30 independently made arcade cabinets, mostly one-offs that just exist somewhere in the world. But Death by Audio closed in 2014, and we were forced to kind of take this collection on the road. So we would partner with music venues and art galleries and basically anyone who would want to host, 10 to 15 arcade cabinets at a time. And so we were kind of this traveling road show. I drove a lot of box trucks during these 4 years until finally we had the opportunity to get our own space.
Yeah, so the photo that we're showing you is before we took this space over called Secret Project Robot. We were very lucky. These were good friends of ours that were ready to move on to other projects. And so they reached out to us to take over their lease, which is when we started the Kickstarter in 2019 to open Wonderville. And so the Kickstarter, lots of work, lots of thank yous to a lot of people that helped us, from backers to supporters. Of course, Death by Audio Arcade's involvement. And so on the right side, we were so lucky, these three different artists, Marlo Dobb, who I'm wearing today, that's Preston Spurlock in the yellow, and Tim Fight, who also did the art for Video Freak. And so Then we also were so lucky to create what we called the Wonder Bundle. It was all these exclusive games from developers that they donated the games so that we could send them out as a tier to, again, raise money to open Wonderville. There's really too many developers for me to list them for you right now, but we're like forever grateful for their help. And then we hit our goal, and the 2 more tiers worth mentioning in that hitting our goal on your left, there was the highest tier was having an exclusive multi-cabinet arcade cabinet. One went to 2-Bit Circus and one went to a private collection, and we customized it so they actually picked Marlo Daub for the artwork on the sides. And then there was a middle tier for people that wanted to support and put their name on a cabinet that we now refer to as the Wonder Cab, and Mark will talk more about it. But Chris, don't get tired of us talking about you yet, because Chris Hernandez literally etched all the names of this tier, all these backers, into the Wonder Cab using a portable CNC machine. Shaper Origin, and like painstakingly, it's beautiful. We're forever grateful, and we're so proud of the Wonder Cab.
Yeah, so basically how we took over the bar was we raised enough money to kind of buy the business from Secret Project Robot. And usually when you open a space, you get kind of a renovation period. But because we just kind of like did this turnkey operation, we had 3 days from when Secret Project Robot closed to when Wonderville opened. So all hands on deck. We all got together. We brought in all the games. We painted all the walls. We renovated everything. And Secret Project Robot closed, I think, April 29th, 2019. Wonderville opened May 1st. It was a wild weekend.
And so, as you can imagine, running any space, let alone one with multiple business aspects to it, is extremely involved. So this is like my short to long list. And if you have any questions about any of these, I'm happy to answer them. But we just wanted to pick a few that we wanted to highlight. So Mark, tell us about the bar.
Yeah, so the bar, Wonderville's 21 plus. We run the arcade on a free play model. All the games are indie games. They're all free to play. So the bar is how we pay our rent. And we had a great time when we opened designing cocktails. We have a large selection of beer and wine and hard seltzer and hard kombucha and hard coconut water.
Oh, it's so good. Hard coconut water.
And we also have a lot of non-alcoholic drinks. We have mocktails, we have yerba mate, we have seltzers.
We might have a bartender in the audience if you have any questions. I don't know.
But in addition to drinks, we don't have a kitchen, but we did during COVID start selling food.
So we got so lucky to team up with Jen De La Vega, who's an amazing chef, cook, and goes by Ranwiches. And so what Jen does for us is comes up with these amazing creative toppings, sets them up in Wonderville on these hot dogs, and then we'll post social media. You have an opportunity now to come up with the name of the hot dog, and if you are selected, you get a free hot dog. And of course, the name should be game-oriented, if possible.
Yeah, it's been great. And then, when the toppings run out, she'll bring new ones. For the games, right, we've obviously been working with Death by Audio Arcade for many years, and so that collection came in. But in addition, we were working with Baby Castles and the NYU Game Center. And so currently at Wonderville, there's a collection of about 30 exclusively indie games. We don't have any retro games. If you go to wonderville.nyc/games, you could see the full list that we have right now. And we're getting new games all the time. We have Nidhogg 2 arriving next week, we think. So we're really excited for that.
And one of those collaborations being Bumble Bear, of course, the creators of Killer Queen. Right, lots of Killer Queeners. And the producers, and also the producers of Black Emperor, which we are so grateful that we have at Wonderville as well. So when you're coming to Brooklyn on now Wednesday, used to be Tuesday, but now Wednesday, come on a Wednesday, you'll get to play Killer Queen. That's their weekly night. But also they've been doing a monthly tournament, and it's been a blast.
So we have a bunch of games that live at Wonderville, but we also have a couple residency programs. So the Wondercade that we mentioned earlier, every 3 months we have an open call for new games, and we install them on the Wondercade for a 3-month residency period. And the open call was just announced yesterday. So if anybody's making an arcade game, check our social media and DBA Arcade for the open call, and please submit because we're always looking for new games. We also run a Pico 8 residency, which is the fantasy console, 128 by 128 pixels, and it's really fun. So if you're making Pico 8 stuff, please send it our way. It's really exciting to see what people are building. When we took over Secret Project Robot, they were a music venue. They primarily had shows every day. And so we took over the bar, and it had a stage and a sound system. And so we continued that, and we have events every night. There's bands, there's DJs, there's comedy shows. You can see our full calendar at wonderville.nyc/events. And we've been getting better equipment and better sound in the space the whole time.
New soundboard.
Got a new soundboard. It's really exciting.
So as Mark said, we do a lot of events. I just wanted to share a few. So when I first started, as I mentioned, my administrative operations, I didn't know I was going to have so much fun doing events. So I just got more and more involved because it's just been such a great time. So going from the top left to right. So that first flyer is a monthly event from Brooklyn Experimental Electronic Music Meetup. In the middle, we had somebody reach out to do this DJ party, Spy Kids themed DJ party. And they played clips from Spy Kids during the party. Next, we have Donut Lounge, which is a monthly hip hop showcase inspired by Jay Dilla's Donuts album, which is really fun. They're all so fun. Disaster Piece is a monthly movie night, and they describe it as weirdest, worst movies ever made to be selected. So it has to be weird and bad. So the next slide that says transposition is Hex 90 is a queer hacker party. No, she's hiding. We love Vi, one of the organizers for Hex 90, so I had to do a shout out. And of course, Mark had to create a Trombone Champ custom controller. So with Holy Wow's Dan and Jackie, we had a Trombone Champ party. It was so much fun. That's the flyer. And tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll set it up tomorrow. It'll be down in the Indie Arcade.
Yeah.
So, running a bar, this is my main job. There's a lot of things that go wrong. This happened when a bunch of 21-year-olds came and decided to take selfies on the sink.
They told us they were 21 for the record. It wasn't like judging. They were like, it's our 21st birthday. We're like, oh no.
I get to learn how to be a plumber, how to be an electrician, figure out where water's coming from. It's a lot of fun. And you can imagine with 30 custom arcade cabinets, it's a 24/7 job. So there's always something to fix, and there's always something breaking.
But merch helps pay for that maintenance. So the first slide on the left, designed by Daphne Love, a killer queener.
She's here.
You'll see a theme here. So we've used this design a few times because we love it so much. The middle is Death by Audio snack packs. So these are a handful of games that you can actually get to play. So if you want to get one so you can play them at home because you'll miss them. And then on the right is another Daphne Love amazing design. We collaborated with Shout Your Abortion. So the proceeds of that shirt are actually going to Shout Your Abortion, grassroots organization that promotes abortion access. But we were just so excited to work with Daphne again.
So yeah, if you want to get involved, this QR code, if you want to take a picture, is for With Friends membership. This is sort of our membership program, and for people in New York, you get discounts on the bar and event tickets. We also have a Discord at wonderville.nyc/Discord, and like we mentioned earlier, we're at Wonderville NYC on every social media platform. We're always interested in meeting people who want to build arcade cabinets, or grant writing, or graphic design, or literally anything. So come and talk to us. Cool. So with that,
All right.
I'll hand it off to.
Thanks so much, Mark.
thank
Yeah, so it's exciting to get some of the background about how this came together, because you see, it's like coming to MAGFest. How does all of this amazing stuff happen? So you get to see some of the concrete steps and fixing the sink and whatnot. And it's listening to you talk, it's making me think about how, even here, like over the past few years, if you've seen the indie arcade at MAGFest, it's gone from being, it was always amazing, but it's gotten much bigger. And there's kind of and MAGFest itself is this gigantic evidence of a movement around celebrating these games. And so now we're going to talk with JC Stat, who is the manager of Wondercade in Cincinnati, about another manifestation of this movement in the form of Wondercade.
Yeah, I'm JC. I'm the manager at Wondercade. Great to be sitting up here with these guys. But I wanted to talk about Wondercade's story a little bit, but mostly as a vehicle for you all to actually be thinking about, well, what is operating an arcade like? What are these steps? What's this journey that I might have to go through gonna look like? So the origin of Wondercade, our two owners, Bill and Leslie, met working at a museum center. And then Bill started collecting retro arcade cabinets. They are a literal mom and pop. They have a family together. And Leslie told Bill, if you're going to be collecting these darn machines, we got to do something with them. So then they decided to start doing some research, touring around the country, looking at different arcade bars, arcades, trying to gather inspiration for what they wanted to manifest and what their idea of an arcade would be. They ended up buying an old plumbing supply storefront in the neighborhood that they lived in and transformed it into Wondercade. So when you're thinking about opening up your arcade, you're going to need just some basic skills to start, or to know the people who are going to have some of these skills. Bill is a great troubleshooter. He has worked with old technology in cars and old electronics. He used to be an electronics salesperson, and obviously has a special relationship with the machines as well. So he brought some skills to what would be the foundation of Wondercade. And Leslie is an excellent organizer, very in touch with the community. And both of them have that experience of curating a collection and trying to provide an experience with the space from the museum center they worked at together. They developed their inventory, right? Their collection. If you're going to have an arcade, you're going to need some things to do in it, right? But they also had a thesis. They had an idea of what they wanted their space to be. They thought that there were certain underserved markets, you might call them, in public recreation, in gaming. And although we have a lot of arcade bars that we're pretty familiar with, in particular, their thesis, having to take their kids around to all these arcade bars around the country, like, well, hard to get our kiddos into a lot of these arcade bars. So that became a part of their thesis, was that they were going to open an all-ages arcade, right? It was going to be a family arcade, and it was going to give a place for parents to go with their kids, and teenagers and tweens to go in their social time. Lastly, they also had, you got to have finances if you're going to do this. And Bill and Leslie made it happen. It was a little magical, but they did it. What you need to consider as a part of the finances is not only the startup capital to get the thing going, maybe that's collecting the inventory, right? But also, how is your establishment going to make money? What Mark and Steph talked about was that their money comes from the alcohol sales. Wondercade's a little bit different. We do, of course, have drink sales, but we run a different model, which I'll get into later. First, I want to speak to that there's a really awkward period where you've set into motion your mission to open an arcade bar or an arcade, and you're not there yet. You've put in a lot of work, money, time, effort, and you haven't had your first guest yet, because there's a lot of work to be done, right? You saw some excellent pictures from the Wonderville story, but that's renovating your space, getting your licenses and your certifications in order. If you're going to sell alcohol, of course, a liquor license. But then other certifications like, being up to fire code, knowing what space you can use in the physical building. There's parts of the physical building that Wondercade is in that we can't use because they aren't up to code, or we have to comply with code in a certain way. And then, of course, you got to ready your inventories. I'm talking about the games themselves, making sure they're in working order, but also if you're going to be selling things, you have to have the ability to do so. You have to have that inventory ready to go and presentable for your guests that will be coming. Fortunately, from my experience, I was close to Wondercade when they were going through this period. I wasn't in the trenches like Bill and Leslie were, so escaped that one. This is a joke. It had to do mostly with taking an old building and trying to bring it up to code. But I think there is some insight to be gained from, there's a certification dance. And when you're bringing new love to an old building, you sometimes get a certain amount of slack, right? Whereas if you embark on a new endeavor, if you get new plumbing, if you cross these, we're going to put money into it thresholds, well, then you got to be properly up to code and jump through all the hoops. So this was a joke that I couldn't resist putting into my presentation about legal non-compliance, which is the favored term now.
Will you read the haiku, please?
Happily. Strict code for new builds. Love old and dance with legal yet non-compliant. I wish I'd have gone. So after you make it through hell, after you make it through that ugly period where you haven't had a guest and it seems like far on the horizon, you're not even ready to have guests yet, make it through that. You're looking at when to open and how to train your staff, hiring staff, finding those people who are competent enough to work for you. What I wanted to say about having procedure is it's okay if you don't have the final details or the final manifestation of what your dream is going to be. It's okay to start with a procedure and know that's going to get worked out iteratively. You're going to improve on it, right? But have a procedure to start with. Don't make it up as you go. There's a difference between making it up as you go and iteratively improving on something and understanding it's not final. We at Wondercade were fortunate enough to trial with private events before we had our grand opening. We were running private events from about March of 2021 through June, which was our grand opening. And all that time, it was a bit of an experiment where we got to iterate pretty rapidly on what our procedure was. We didn't have to have a public facing like, this is how Wondercade works. We got to figure out some of the more base level stuff ahead of time and figure out what we thought would work for us. Before we do the stress test, which is the grand open. If you're lucky, it will be a stress test because people will be excited about your arcade that you're opening up. And making sure that you're in working order and you've got your bases covered before then is good because that'll give you less of a headache when you get to the grand opening, which it'll be a bit overwhelming and you'll have lots to do. But the better prepared you are for that, the more you'll be able to glean from it instead of just being in survival mode for your grand opening. After you do your grand opening, you've got a honeymoon period where you are open to the public. You do have like public relations, and there's kind of a grace period you get from your guests and your target audience where they understand you're new, and you can kind of give the excuse, we're still figuring things out here, but you want to hammer things out for the long term. This is where, like, yeah, you do kind of want to get that dream, and it can change in the future, but it'll be more of an ordeal to change in the future. You'll have to really communicate that with your base. Okay, so as far as Wondercade's business model, our target demo, the people we are really trying to impress are parents. Whether that's to bring their kid to the arcade and spend time with them there, which is great, we love that, or if their kids are old enough, recommending it to their kid, or the grandparents to take their kid. What we needed to do was make Wondercade a desirable place for parents to say, that's a safe place for my kid. I trust Wondercade with my kids and bringing my kids there. So that was a big part of Wondercade's business model and who we're thinking of when we make certain decisions with the arcade. As far as the finances that I spoke about earlier, we make money through party rental. We have a party room that we rent out while the arcade is open, so you can have your festivities, food, presents, all decorations gathered in the same place. And we also, when we are closed, will open up the arcade for you at private events. And that's kind of cool that you have an arcade all to yourself because we're not open all the time. Additionally, we use an $8 admission model. We are a free play arcade, which I highly advocate for. I think free play and getting away from coin op is a big deal, especially in the indie scene where you don't have established IPs to rely on pulling quarters. Free play is good for experimentation and modern creatives, in my view. But we have an $8 admission that facilitates our free play. We also do sell drinks and snacks, candy, but the emphasis of our business model is on the admission instead of, I do like that because then we're not painting ourselves into a corner of like, oh man, we really gotta like sell drinks to make this work. Fortunately for us and our demo, right, the admission is people are coming for the games, and it's very straightforward. Yes, you're coming to play the games. That's where we're getting our money. In particular, our model is you pay an $8 admission, play all the games all you want all day till we close that day, come and go as you please. And that works well for families too, because sometimes they're making a day of it. They're having a day on the town with their kids, and they want to leave to go get food at and if they stay in the neighborhood, that's great. We have local partnership from that, where we say, well, shoot, you're looking to get something to eat. I can recommend Nation down the road. They're a great spot. And then people are still encouraged. They're encouraged to go to our neighborhood partners for food or whatever else they got to do that day. And then they're welcome to come back afterwards. So that's how our admission model works. So as far as the nitty-gritty of Wondercade, we had about $180K of revenue in our first year of operation, and here's where it came from. The parties are a big deal for us. That's a large chunk of revenue. It would be difficult to operate Wondercade without that, and I think it's sometimes a thing overlooked. So if you're thinking about your place, and you're walking through a building trying to imagine the arcade, think about where you might have a secluded private space that you could rent out as a party room. Keep that in mind, because that's been a boon for Wondercade. In total, we had a lot of visitors, over 14,000. We had almost 200 party bookings in a calendar year, which is kind of funny to think about. Like, we're having a booking majority of days, and being only open so many days a week, we've got several parties a day, which is a lot of cleaning, to be fair, but that's what they pay us for. We do that. It's So a lot of our job is cleaning the arcade. And I'll get into that in just a second. Another part of this, I'm pretty sure that the alcohol, snacks, and soda, the cost to initially purchase that has already been factored into these figures because that is absent from our costs and expenses pie graph, which is segued here. Our expenses were almost matched by our revenue. There's a couple layers to this. One, we're early in our business, so that's understandable, but there's also a financial dance being played because we have machines that Bill and Leslie just connected that personally, you know? So they're getting compensated for those machines, right? We pay rent on the building that we bought to another company also owned by Bill and Leslie. It's a little complicated, but I'm sure Stephanie has a good explanation of why that's the right way to do it. She does the legal and financials. I'm just the manager, so. Something to consider, though, not only maintenance and repair costs, but there's also there's an interesting idea about depreciation of these old machines, right? Because not only do they have maintenance costs, but it doesn't happen all at once all the time. Sometimes it is over time, and so that's a funny financial thing to navigate. Unfortunately, I don't have to do it yet for Wondercade. I misspelled equipment, which is tragic, but I did spell capital correctly. What I mean by non-comprehensive is this pie chart of 178K is missing those things. Those pieces are not included in this expenses pie chart. This is not to say that Wondercade isn't doing well. I think we are doing well. But these are the numbers that we're looking at and where things go. The biggest takeaway, I think, is like where we're spending money. It's mostly on workers and compensation. It's the people running the arcade. We do spend money on rent, utilities, repairing the machines, but the meat of where our money is going is to the people working it. On a day-to-day basis, I'll give you a rundown of what I look at, so maybe you're a little more mentally prepared if you ever embark on this endeavor yourself. We have to ready and kind of deploy the arcade. By ready, that's making sure it's in working order, our machines are good to go. And deploy is sometimes, it's not as simple as hitting the breaker to turn this bay of machines on. Sometimes you have to actually set things up, setting up our consoles, or setting up outside furniture, for instance. Like these are day-to-day tasks, but getting our sellables ready to go, making sure that's properly stocked. The point of sale, being a clerk, selling the things that are sellable, is a lot of what I do. Working the front desk is another way to say it. At Wondercade, we have this idea of the game guide. I don't know if other people say that or if that's just our own weird idiosyncrasy, but that's the person who's working the floor, right? Bill and Leslie have come from sales and museum backgrounds, so there's somebody there to contextualize the experience for you. A floor manager, right? They're here to help people with games, help people relate to the games, and it's kind of like a customer service role, but also just making sure the arcade's moving along and not just hanging out at the front desk, right? When you find something wrong with the machines, there's levels to it, right? Sometimes there are easy fixes. Sometimes there are less easy fixes. I see some of you operators in the crowd. You know what I'm talking about. I've got a certain wheelhouse of maintenance and repair that I can take care of right now. Then it gets escalated above me to Bill, and sometimes it gets above Bill's pay grade. And we have to work with other partners on repair and maintenance of our machines. The big thing, and I think especially in especially with regard to COVID, with regard to being indoors and a nice recreation for winter time, and for our sake, dealing with so many kids who are absolutely disgusting. You got to keep the place clean. I've been in some excellent, I love a dive bar, and I love a dive arcade bar. But that's not the business that Wondercade is, because we've got to sell to those parents, right? This is a safe, good place for you and your kids. And being clean and sanitizing the games is a big part of that, right? Then you're also fielding contacts when people call you or send emails, inquiries. Making sure you're staying on top of that is part of operations on a daily basis. On the weekly side, you've got your reorders, working with distributors, beer distributors, other alcohol distributors. There's alcohol distribution is heavily regulated, and they're also have been doing it for a long time. So a lot of times, if you're small potatoes like a mom and pop arcade in Cincinnati, you got to play their game and navigate around them. You've got to schedule your workers, make sure that everyone's getting paid, and if you are employing young people, which we are able to do at an all-ages arcade, there are other hoops you have to consider, or things you have to consider when scheduling young workers. And then, of course, like I talked about the maintenance I could do, and sometimes it gets above that, and we have to escalate maintenance beyond that. The monthly stuff is the stuff that I enjoy. I like the vision, the direction, right? But that, of course, as I've chronologically presented, comes after the day-to-day stuff, right? Doing reports on your sales. If you have machines that collect data on play, cool. You know, we don't at Wondercade. We have a lot of retro games that aren't collecting metadata. They could collect quarters, but we're not a coin-op arcade. So if you have reporting, it's mostly on sales is what we're looking at. If you have any decisions to be made about what beverages you're going to stock, snacks you can find. There have been extended periods where we cannot get supply of what we intended to stock, and we have to pivot, reconsider, or change what we're doing and selling, and doing that kind of research and decisions. There's been plenty of soda tastings that Bill and Leslie have been a part of. Which sounds a bit silly, but they do that kind of stuff. And then this last piece, the direction of your space, you craft with 3 Ps, in my view. Your policies, your programming, and your procedure. Procedure being how you run the place. What do you do on like the fundamental? What's your base? And you can change that, modify as needed. Like if there's a part of your arcade is not getting cleaned the way it should be, you might have to change your procedure. Or if there's a gap in your guest's experience, maybe there are steps you can take to address that, right? Your policies are catering to who you want in the arcade and how they conduct themselves, right? That can be a really important thing for creating a vibe. That's something I'm considerate of in an all-ages arcade. Because, like I said, kids can be little monsters sometimes. Creates a pretty harsh vibe. So if we have policies about, bringing your kids and, having a rules sign about how we are to conduct ourselves at the arcade, that can help influence the direction of the arcade and who wants to come there. And then lastly is programming. This is something, how many people, raise show of hands, have participated in a weekly or local regular event at a venue? I do weekly Killer Queen. I'm one of those Killer Queen players. But that's how I got into arcades, and that's how I got in touch with the community. But programming is a bit of a curation of who you want in the arcade as well. You're trying to court certain people to come to your space because that's Well, you have to figure out who you want in your space, but you can use programming to make that happen, right? That's some of the stuff I wanted y'all to consider about your journey that you might be undergoing in the near future about opening your own venues, which is very, very exciting. I'll toss it back to our lovely moderator, Alan.
Thank you, JC. Yeah, thanks for telling us all about Wondercade. All right, and so we have some time for some discussion. I think that now that JC, Mark, and Stephanie have all learned about each other's work, they might have questions for each other, and you might have questions as well. It's really it's interesting to consider. I don't have any facts to share with you about this, but it seems like there may be an arcade bar of some kind in most cities in the United States today. It's a very common thing, and it wasn't for a long time. There were places like Fun Spot in New Hampshire where you could see arcade cabinets, but they kind of disappeared from public life for a while. And we've just heard two really different descriptions of like the kind of social life and the kind of working practices that revolve around making a space like that exist. Something that really stood out was the relationship with like whether the venue is 21 plus or all ages.
That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it is. And I wondered if Wonderville had any comments about that and hearing JC's discussion of it.
So I don't think many people know. So we tried to be all ages for a whole 48 hours.
Oh, I gotta know now.
We wanted to reach out to our community board, want to get involved, and we still do. We still talk to the community board to do some community events and still hope to have some community days. So in the warmer months, on Saturdays and Sundays, we open early and they can come from 2 to 5. Has to be with a chaperone because, as we all now know, thank you, CJ, kids are monsters. And so, but what happened in those 48 hours was we met 2 lovely families with kids, and then the kids came and they brought their kids, and it multiplied very quickly. And then all of a sudden they were buying soda for $1, and that just doesn't pay our rent. And I appreciated you sharing the financials. Like New York is so much more expensive.
We're operating at really different scales, I think.
Gosh, we have bills on our bills. And our previous mayor was coming up with more excuses to charge small businesses and our type of business. But so the ethos of 21 plus and trying to find ways that we can sneak in people that are under 21, but unfortunately for the business model and for paying in the bar, yeah.
Yeah, the $1 drinks don't work if your business model is based on selling drinks.
Also, the fines of serving somebody
We're learning,
underage is insane. The bartender gets a fine and the bar owner gets a fine. And I don't know, you had dinner already at $10,000 to both. So it's just not worth the risk in New York. So that's why you see so many bars that do 21 because it's just too scary. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's interesting. I hadn't considered before how the 21 plus versus all ages topic intersects with whether it's a drink-based business model or a rental / like fee to enter. But just one last thing. But in both cases, the games, you mentioned this phrase coin op. In both cases, the games are not transaction based. They're on free play. And that I do think that's more common, but there are some places like the Santa Cruz Boardwalk, for example, in Santa Cruz, California. They have an RFID thing to have individual transactions to play the game. So there's even like a Robotron cabinet that has an RFID thing installed in it. So it's kind of funny to see that. But I think that also is a common practice as well.
Yeah, I mean, just from my point of view, it never felt like a quarter was worth a play. And some games that we have are like, it's not, a play is like, what, 10 seconds? So how do you quantify how much that costs? And I think a lot of places are like, well, it's just easier to charge an admission fee or make it donation-based. And I don't know. For anyone that's doing coin op, it tends to be like a card where it's the cost of it is some amount of fake points that the place invented.
And then what do you do with line wobbler?
Yeah, it's hard to quantify a lot of like these kind of art installations.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, and so, yeah, maybe it's a good time to open it up for questions from the audience. There's a question in the front.
More of a couple comments of like penalties for selling alcohol to minors can vary from state to state.
Yeah.
In Virginia, and I've seen this happen a couple times, unfortunately, with some of my favorite restaurants. You can lose your liquor license entirely.
Yeah.
And then have to be forced to reapply.
Yeah.
And also, as far as monetizing your arcade games, there's a barcade in Richmond called the Circuit, where you can basically buy like a small bucket of like slugs, basically coins, for like a set amount of money. I don't exactly remember what the exchange is, but you pay the money, they give you a bucket of coins, and then you can redeal that bucket if you need to.
And just to repeat back in case folks can't hear, the comment was about just making a comment about liquor licenses and how that can be very complex, and then just another model of a kind of point system for playing the games.
And that is the case in New York as well. Thank you. I did leave that out, that then you could potentially lose your liquor license and the whole reapplying, that they can then deny you because you didn't follow the rules. It's, thank you.
Yeah, so do you still want to open an arcade bar?
Of course they do.
Yeah.
Questions?
So we have another question in the front.
So on the free-to-play model, how do you stop certain patrons from, say, monopolizing certain games? And this kind of goes, I guess, to both.
And the question is, how do you prevent players from monopolizing certain games?
Just, let's say it goes on like Killer Queen.
Yeah, I see.
But they sell it all evening long.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great question. Yeah.
I'd be happy to take a first stab at it. For Wondercade, we mostly see this on our consoles. The kids want to play the Switch, and this is a gap in our policy. We don't have anything specified for this, but we've been very fortunate that there has been we've been pretty fortunate with the community. It has been self-policing in our experience. And there are instances of children who don't have the social skills to navigate these kind of situations coming to us with like, help, I want to play the Switch, or I want to play a different game or something, but they're playing it. So then you have to figure out how to talk to kids and navigate that, help them navigate the social situation that they're not prepared for. But otherwise, especially with adults, it has been self-policing in our experience.
And our only issue is when that adult has had too many libations, and now you have to.
I mean, a lot of our games are like round based. So typically, like, people are obsessive about Black Emperor, but that round takes like a minute. So if there's somebody waiting, they'll usually like let the other person go, and then they kind of take turns.
Yeah, I do think it is a lot of self-policing. I think it's only been once when we had the Ichi zone set up, and like that was also reminding them that they weren't going to beat it by 4 a.m. anyway. Yeah.
The bar will close before the countdown ends. Yeah.
Most likely, yeah.
I did chat with someone at Wonderville the other day who demonstrated self-policing, like you're saying, this kind of restraint of playing the games by saying that they were willfully not playing Black Emperor because every time they play it, they get the high score, and they don't want to take over the leaderboard.
Was it Alex?
Yes, it was Alex.
It was Alex. Okay.
We love Alex Panay.
Yeah.
But to what you're speaking of like they're round-based games, right? And it's been self-policed so far. If we were to introduce a policy that we could then point to, it would be around all of these games. Most games that are in an arcade environment in a cabinet have a finite period of time that you play for that are based in some sort of round system. Consoles, a little bit of a gray area. You might want to figure out a different policy, but you could use these discrete units of play that arcade cabinets are traditionally known for to be like, that could be the base of your policy. Like, hey, if someone's queued up behind you and you finish your round, then you get to the back of the line.
All right, we have another question right here.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of related to the all ages thing, but Wondercade, you have a sort of that, you have alcohol.
That's correct.
Then you do kind of a community, you're trying to do like a kids' place for certain hours, I guess, in the idea.
Kids, This is a good question. I didn't tell you.
The question was about the hours that kids access this venue.
Those two things seem intentional with each other.
I see. So, yeah, managing the time and the time when drinks are being served versus when kids are having a birthday party and things like that. I see, yes. Yeah. And the identity of being a bar.
This is a good question, and I'm glad you asked it. I would say that Wondercade does not identify as a bar. They identify as an arcade that does sell drinks. So, yeah, that you got to something right there. But not to liken Wondercade to Chuck E. Cheese, but how many people have been to Chuck E. Cheese or their family took them there? Okay, we got some hands. Your parents got pizza and drank beer while you were running around like a bunch of gremlins. That was not a sober environment. Or a teetotal environment, that's what I should say. So how do we navigate that? A lot of spaces do it already. A lot of breweries kind of do this dance of, yes, people are drinking, and yes, there are kids here. And you generally trust the families to figure that out. We do, however, say on days that we are open past 9 o'clock, just get out. There's no reason for a child under 18 to be here after 9 o'clock. We'll have a little adult swim until we close for the night. Oh, a lot of nods. People like the adult swim policy.
Nice.
But that's like a tactic that Wondercade used. So if you do want your venue to encapsulate a business model that is family friendly and also has an adult nightlife or something, has that kind of atmosphere you're looking for, there are some tactics you might be able to use. You guys talked about having like set hours and
right now, warmer months, Saturdays and Sundays 2 to 5, and then we just politely like, okay, it's yeah, it actually hasn't been an issue. It's been pretty easy. Like we have just this one regular family that comes with their one kid, and it's good.
Nice.
Good. Yeah.
Anyone yeah, question back there in the pink shirt.
Yeah. Could you just talk more about licensing?
So,
I'm just wondering if there's actually more complexity there.
So the question is about licensing. Just you want to hear some comments about how licensing works in terms of the licensing of games.
I guess the broad, more broad.
getting
Yeah.
Oh, licensing for the venue.
Yeah, I feel
Okay,
like
yes.
somebody might have like paid you off because I love talking about licensing. So, so I mean, like somebody at the front mentioned, like each state is very different when it comes to the licensing. So like talking about New York City is awesome because it's just so involved. You've got your state with the liquor authority, and that's assuming you're doing a bar. Then you have Department of Health because thanks to our many governors, all bars are considered restaurants in New York City. They always have been, but due to COVID, it had to be like more food than just doing peanuts and doing chips. FDNY, NYPD, not so much. FDNY Fire Department is gonna make sure that you have fire extinguishers, is gonna make sure you have certain egress with where the games are. We continuously fight about one corner and whether it's egress or not. And that's okay, because they don't seem to pay attention to it. This is being recorded. I'm not saying this anymore. The list goes on, but those are probably the big ones. When you're starting from scratch, like Mark and I mentioned, we're so lucky that we had a venue that already had the liquor license, but you might have to go to the Office of Buildings. So buildings is really terrible in New York. They just make things extremely complicated. It really comes down to finding the structure that like can fit your needs from the beginning, and that just makes opening a space so much harder. So we just got so lucky that it already had a lot of the things that we knew we needed, as well as the space, right? Like we knew we had this amazing collection thanks to Death by Audio Arcade, and we certainly didn't want to only have 5 or 7 games. We wanted to build more games. And now we find ourselves saying like, I wish Wonderville was bigger and that we have even more space. If you want to hear more, I could go on way too long, so I'm going to stop. I hope I answered your question though.
Yes, further back there. Yeah. Yep.
Do you guys know any landlords looking for serious barcade tenants?
I believe I do. I believe his name is Alex.
Does anyone in the sorry, the question was, Alan?
The question was looking for landlords.
Any landlords
This is
for serious
him.
barcade
It's him.
tenants in this area?
Oh, okay. Yes. There's someone interested in finding potential tenants for who wants to open an arcade.
He wants
In
to open
downtown
an arcade bar in the
Baltimore.
Someone wants to open
Baltimore
an
area.
arcade bar. That's great.
If
Well
you are a
done.
person who would like to open an arcade bar in downtown Baltimore and you're in this room, come talk to us or the guy waving in the crowd. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
So I'm actually pretty close to opening a place in Brooklyn. You're right, it's obscenely expensive. I was curious. It's a different thing. It's gonna be more like a retro game tabletop place. But I was wondering, like, I don't know exactly how much it's cool, but like, what did you have in terms of kind of like startup and like how much runway did you have and kind of like really profitable? Like how long did that?
So the question has to do with the question is of how long did it take to become profitable after opening? Yeah.
Yeah.
When the Kickstarter and all, it's in
Yeah.
the start.
Considering all of the initial investment income in the Kickstarter, what was the starting point like?
Yeah, I can definitely tell you a little bit, and if you want to talk more after, just because it's a very long answer. But the Kickstarter was that not having to have investors, so that again, like I'm with Mark on this vision, but it's very much his vision and Death by Audio Arcade's games collection together. That we didn't want anyone to hold us back. And like we talked to a few people in the beginning about investment, and it's just everyone had other prerogatives and other agendas, and it's just kind of keeping it the two of us. I don't know if we said we were married, so stuck together in a good way. We love each other. So that initial seed money, basically, and then buying the business, right? There's a lot of equipment and specifics would come with the bar. Like, even though we have a landlord, we don't own the property, we were still buying out the previous owners in a lot of different areas. So we still needed, I want to say 2 years. And okay, I'm laughing because I kid you not, Mark and I moved into a new apartment. We're sitting on the couch and I'm like, my business plan says that by the end of the summer, we're going to be debt free. And that was February 2020. So I jinxed it big time. And, so COVID brought new debt, but we were so lucky. Our landlord is actually one of the more decent landlords. He gave us a handful of months at 50% rent, and then the other months, so we owe him a little bit, but he, thank goodness, is a wealthy landlord, and he doesn't need our money. He doesn't bother us on a regular basis. So we're in a really good position to be debt-free, but we're also, another silver lining of COVID was the loan that we got is a government loan at 3%. I'm not in a rush to pay it back. So
We also, that was an opportunity to just consolidate all the debt under the EIDL. So now, we have this EIDL loan, which is at 3%, but we basically paid off all the debt from opening so that we could have this new long-term loan.
But I think the bar owners that we became close with in the community in Brooklyn would tell you 2 to 3 years. But it doesn't mean you can't pay yourself. It just means you're going to maneuver around those bills and what do they look like in the terms of those bills to pay them back.
All right. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much for the conversation and for the questions. Yeah. If you have additional questions, I think that our panelists are really interested in talking to you. So please, check in with them after the panel. And stickers. Yeah.
Come get stickers.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan.